So I wanted, before we get started, to let everyone know that I have a new podcast out, and it's called Meditations. If you like the Meditations segment of this current podcast, you'll like the Meditations podcast. It's nothing but 20 minutes of meditative sounds. And now, on with the podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Caesar's Palace for 12 rounds of boxing. In the red corner, from Los Angeles, California, wearing the red trunks with the gold trim, weighing in at 125 pounds, the lightweight champion of the world, Danny Little Red Lopez. Well, Bill, our winners get a home theater receiver. That's right. Experience the full potential of high-definition video with this 72-channel digital home theater receiver from Yamaha. But wait, that's not all. They also get a 5.1-channel surround sound system from Mirage. With 5 palm-sized speakers and a compact subwoofer cube, the MX 5.1 brings you huge immersive sound with Mirage's omnipolar technology. All from the Spiegel catalog, Chicago, Illinois, 60609. And they're taking closer order as down the stretch they come. Mr. Hot Stuff has 3 lengths to make up with chocolate candy last. On the rail, take the points behind that gallant son with chocolate candy gaining on the outside. In the lead is Pioneer of the Nile being tackled by chocolate candy. They're neck and neck as they come to the wire. And Pioneer of the Nile holds off chocolate candy and wins the Santa Anita Derby. And now, on your feet, time to greet holder of 14 NBA titles, your home team, your Los Angeles Lakers. Number 3 at 6'8", 5th year out of UCLA, playing forward, Trevor Ariza. Starting at center, number 17 at 7 feet, 4th year out of St. Andrews High School, Andrew Bynum. And at guard, number 24, 6'6", 13th season out of Loyal Marion High School, Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, crypto, is it money? Is it not? Crypto's kind of like the trans women are women of money. They both, I believe it is. I believe they both are. They both got a lot in common, both of their value really depends on how much you're willing to believe that they are what they say they are.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, Apollo Wednesday, June the 4th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the headlines, patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, and Apollo. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you, and now the headlines for Wednesday, June the 4th. FBI Director Kash Patel, I can confirm that the FBI arrested a Chinese national within the United States who allegedly smuggled a dangerous biological pathogen into the country. Geert Wilders, we must immediately stop immigrants from Islamic countries from entering the country. Breaking, Elon Musk calls for defunding the United Nations. Peter Doocy raises questions why Biden's signature only appears on one pardon paperwork, which is his son's, Hunter. A rapidly growing nationalist alliance is forming in Europe. Israel has eliminated the entire Hamas command and leadership in Gaza, including all brigade commanders, battalion commanders, police commanders, banking chiefs, and internal security chiefs. They're all wiped out. The Gaza brigade commander is the only one left to hunt. And those are the headlines for Wednesday, June the 4th. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the Patriotic Short.
Why during World War II did Wehrmacht officers wear holsters on the left side and Red Army officers on the right? If you look closely at photos from World War II, you will notice a curious detail. Wehrmacht officers often had their holsters on the left side. This is neither a coincidence nor an accident. Although there was no strict statutory order to this effect in the Wehrmacht, in reality, most German officers and non-commissioned officers carried their pistol on the left side. This was a stable army tradition, which dates back to the Kaiser's times. Why on the left? Paradoxically, it was more convenient for right-handed men, and they were the majority in the army, to draw the pistol in this way. It was different in the Red Army. There, since pre-revolutionary times, according to the regulations, a saber was carried on the left and a revolver on the right. This tradition survived in the Soviet Army. Officers more often wore their holsters on the right, and this became the norm.
And that was the Patriotic Short. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, motivation.
Everybody wants to be a beast. Everybody wants to be number one. Everybody wants to be the best. Everybody wants to succeed. Everybody wants to have, to be, and do what they feel they've been called to do. The challenge becomes that most of us, when it's time to do what beasts do, we don't do it. So, E.T., what do you mean? Look, I told you, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I just woke up recently and it was 2:45. And the average person in me said, E.T., just pull the covers back over here. It's okay. You got 15 minutes. But the phenomenal in me said, E.T., if you go back to sleep for those 15 minutes, there's no guarantee you're going to get up at 3 o'clock. If you go back to sleep right now, you might wake up and it's 4 o'clock. You might wake up and it's 5 o'clock. You might wake up and it's 6 o'clock. All you have is right now. Are those 15 minutes that sweet that you're going to push back your dream, that you're going to push back your goal? Everything you've ever wanted, son, you're right there. You're so close. You're closer than you've ever been before. Those 15 minutes are not worth the rest of your life. Those 15 minutes are not worth you slipping down the chart. That is not worth it because you wake up at 3:30. Some other kid's getting up at 3 and he's got 30 minutes on you today. So I need you not only to want to be a beast, I need you to get in beast mode and stay in beast mode. I need you to put on beast mode. I need you to live in beast mode. Everybody's got a dream. Everybody's got a goal. Everybody wants something in life. But many of you in this room right now, your beast mode is idle. Your beast mode is not turned on. And when you leave this place, I'm telling you, your life is going to go to a whole other level if you can learn to turn that switch on and keep that switch on.
When you want to become a diamond, your whole attitude change, your whole mindset, your thinking, your relationships, the decisions that you make, how you spend your time, your energy, all of it changes. See, this is something that you can't be in this business. This business has to be in you.
Continue to work, continue that course, believing in the work he calls, the end state of it all, knowing that the pressures and the problems coming to welcome you, those are the situations that are going to formulate and mold you into the person you want to be. Accept this as a reality. Sacrifice this day for the investment in the future, greatness.
So I'm telling you, in life, you start running from a class, you start running from a subject that you don't like, it will haunt you for the rest of your natural life. It ain't going nowhere. You gotta take that thing out, like, you gotta take the breath out. So some of y'all are afraid of math. Go after it. Go get it. Don't run from it no more. Go get it. You go in there and go get that grade. You go in there and get that information so you can pass that class. You gotta go get it. I want you to go in confidence that you've never had before. And every giant in your life, slay him. You go back and slay him. Don't kill him, slay him. I'm tired of people talking about, I want to be successful. I'm tired of people saying, I want to be great. Look, everybody wants to be a beast until it's time to do what real beasts do. And let me tell you something, that means getting up early and going to bed late. That means you don't go to sleep when you're tired. You go when you're done. So remember, success is never on discount, and greatness ain't never on sale. I challenge you to have more. I challenge you to do more. I challenge you to be more. You gotta get this beast mode. You gotta embody beast mode. Everything about you has to say, I ain't playing. If it's to have, I'm gonna get it. And I ain't leaving none of it behind. It's mine. Beast mode.
And that was motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, meditate. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Stoic.
Maintain composure. Maintain control. When forced, as it seems, by circumstances into utter confusion, get a hold of yourself quickly. Don't be locked out of the rhythm any longer than necessary. You'll be able to keep the beat if you are constantly returning to it. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 6.11. We're going to get caught off guard from time to time. Not just by black swan type events, a terrorist attack or a financial panic, but also by minor, unexpected occurrences. Your car battery dies. Your friend cancels at the last minute. You suddenly don't feel well. These situations have a way of throwing us into confusion and disarray. We've made an assumption about the world and built plans on top of that assumption. Now that the assumption has collapsed, so too might our organization or understanding. That's perfectly okay. It happens. A line of infantrymen will face withering attacks. What's key is that they don't allow chaos to reign. Musicians will experience technical difficulties and lose their place from time to time. In both cases, it just matters that they get back into position as quickly as possible. The same is true for you today. The order and peace might be interrupted by a new circumstances. Okay. Get a hold of yourself and find your way back.
And that was the Daily Stoic. And now, breaking in the habit.
For centuries, the Catholic Church has maintained a clear and succinct doctrine. Outside of the Church, there is no salvation. But does this mean that only Catholics can be saved? Not necessarily. The Church recognizes that some people are what is called invincibly ignorant, meaning that they have not had the gospel properly proclaimed to them through no fault of their own. While this does not automatically mean that they will be saved, it does mean that God, in his mercy, may provide an alternate way for them to be incorporated into his plan of salvation. Pope Pius IX taught in his document on the promotion of false doctrines, because God knows, searches, and clearly understands the minds, hearts, thoughts, and nature of all, his supreme kindness and clemency do not permit anyone at all who is not guilty of deliberate sin to suffer eternal punishments. In addition to this, the Second Vatican Council decreed that people of other religions are not necessarily excluded from God's salvific plan. Even those who seek God with a sincere heart and strive to do his will may, by his grace, be led towards salvation. This does not mean, however, that someone can be saved by another religion or by being a good person alone. Even when salvation is extended to those who do not explicitly know Christ, it is still through Jesus' grace and work of redemption that they are saved, for he is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one can come to the Father except through him. And so, while the Church teaches that salvation comes through Christ and his Church alone, it also acknowledges that God, in his mercy, may work in ways that are not always visibly apparent. Even those outside the Church can find elements of truth and goodness that may prepare them to receive salvation.
And that was breaking in the habit. And now the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, all the evils, abuses, and iniquities popularly ascribed to businessmen and to capitalism were not caused by an unregulated economy or by a free market, but by government intervention into the economy, unquote. And that was Ayn Rand from the chapter America's Persecuted Minority, Big Business, from the book Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Back in a minute. And now, gaslighting.
We have a quarter of all university students in Britain who now say they self-censor in universities and lectures because they are scared of saying what they really think. We've had prominent academics like Kathleen Stock essentially chased out of their jobs by militant, radical, progressive academics, administrators, vice-chancellors. And so I think universities have essentially given up on the founding idea that they're here to search for truth, that they're here to expose students to a wide range of ideas, And I do think they've morphed into highly political projects.
And that was gaslighting. Back in a minute. Thank you, Maria, then Stu.
Johnson.
So we are seeing sausage get made front and center.
Oh, yeah.
We don't often get to see it done this way, from tariffs to the big, beautiful bill to on and on and on. They will get a deal done. I think there probably is a little bit too much spending in this bill. I'm with the Senate Republicans. I'd like to see some cutbacks on some of the subsidies. And let's aim for some sort of balanced budget at some point, for crying out loud.
Well, you're not going to get a return to pre-pandemic spending overnight. But at least that's the direction they're headed in. Chris Johnson, how do you see things? What are you thinking about?
Well, and that's why we need to get really creative with this stuff. And as the judges that are stymieing President Trump's agenda on trade and are limiting his ability to put tariffs in place, we should be looking to the big, beautiful bill as a way to codify the Trump agenda and actually hold China accountable for stuff like their bizarrely low environmental standards, their labor standards, all the things that undercut us and allow them to dump cheap steel on our shores. We should be putting that into law through Congress. If the courts are saying that Congress has to act on this, and the president doesn't have authority for this, Congress needs to act. And it doubles as a revenue raiser, a pay-for some of the things that we're worried about in terms of the massive deficit explosion that could potentially happen.
Talk about revenue raise.
Exactly. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars.
Tariffs have brought in $22.5 billion just in the month of April. You extrapolate that for 3 years, it's $750 billion. Mahak, your thoughts?
Well, and nobody's talking about tariffs today. There's such a big misconception about this bill that's come out of the House. First of all, this is a budget bill that was written by Republicans. It is federal spending that is being cut over $1.6 trillion. That's straight from the CBO. So when critics specifically state that we're raising, no, we're not. We are cutting taxes. We're making sure that's permanent. That is what the GOP is focused on, in addition to securing the border.
We're going to be watching all of that. Thanks, everybody. Great panel. Have a great day. Varney and Company picks it up now. Stu, take it away.
All right. Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. This is deadline day. Countries which want to do a trade deal have to have their best offer on the table today. The president wants to move quickly. He wants to wrap things up by July the 9th. Early this morning, very early actually, 2:30 Eastern, he took to Truth Social to talk about China's leader. He said Xi Jinping is very tough and extremely hard to make a deal with. The two leaders are expected to talk on the phone this week. Separately, Trump has signed the order imposing 50% tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. Canada calls that unlawful. Mexico wants an exclusion. And this is just coming at us. Our U.S. trade representative is extending tariff exemptions on certain Chinese goods. All right, not much impact. I thought that might have a significant impact on the market, but no. We're still down a little on the Dow. We're off 21 points, but the S&P just went positive, now up a tiny fraction. The Nasdaq also slightly positive. Let's have a look at Bitcoin. Earlier this morning, we had it at 104. Now it's at 105. The 10-year Treasury still below 4.5%. You're down to 441. The 2-year coming in well below the 4% level, 393. And we're going to take a look at the 30-year. As of right now, it's edging closer. Now it's moving away from the 5% level, 492. That's on the 30-year. Politics. Elon Musk turns his venom on Trump's big, beautiful bill. He calls it a disgusting abomination. He says, shame on those who voted for it. He's upset there are not more spending cuts. Now, Speaker Johnson says Musk is just terribly wrong. He thinks Musk is angry because the bill drops electric vehicle tax credits, which help Tesla. Flood the zone. Hakeem Jeffries is urging all Democrats to attack all aspects of the Trump presidency on all occasions. The Democrat policy, pile on Trump. The FBI has intercepted Chinese nationals smuggling a crop-killing biological pathogen into a lab at the University of Michigan. 2 arrested. On the show today, the Democrats have a new think tank to help them win in 2028. The founder wants the party to retreat from liberal and progressive groups and concentrate on being popular.
And he wants them to quit using the language of the elites. The Ukrainian drone attack deep inside Russia, changing warfare as we know it. If terrorists smuggle drones into America to attack our military bases from inside the country, we too are threatened. It is Wednesday, June the 4th, 2025.
And that was Stuart Varney and Maria Bartiromo, Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, what does the phrase, if you're explaining, you're losing, mean? This was said by Ronald Reagan, speaking of political campaigns. From the perspective of your audience, if you have to explain yourself, you come off looking desperate to convince. As a consequence, you lose the high ground. From a more philosophical perspective, if you have a clear conscience and strong conviction towards the positions you take, your values, truth, and direction, you don't need the opinions or consent of others. As a consequence, you don't need to explain yourself. However, if you yourself are not convinced of the validity and truth of your position, or you can't fully justify your choices, then you continue to expel words in an attempt to create the illusion of certainty. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Candace. Why? Because women with big boobs that speak French are hot.
Qui dit léopard dit plusieurs maillots agités. Vous savez, j'en ai plein et me donne à tout le bal. Bref, je vais vous faire grâce et vous dire d'où vient ce maillot de bain. C'est italien, c'est Calcedonia. Pour une fois que j'étais en maillot de chez eux, j'ai adoré. Pourquoi? Parce qu'ils vendent le bandeau agité avec. Donc voilà, je suis sympa. Ouais, le Messie, je t'écoute. Je vois ce qu'il veut. Donc, qui dit...
And that was Candace. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from a book that's called Good Inside. What's the opposite of understanding? For this argument's sake, it's convincing. Convincing is the attempt to prove a singular reality, to prove that only one thing is true. Convincing is an attempt to be right, and as a result make the other person wrong. It rests on the assumption that there's only one correct viewpoint. And then my question is this supposed to be convincing? Further, convincing has one goal in mind, being right. And here's the unfortunate consequence of being right. The other person feels unseen and unheard, at which point most people become infuriated and combative, because it feels as if the other person does not accept your realness or worth. Feeling unseen and unheard makes connection impossible. Understanding two things are true and convincing one thing is true are diametrically opposed ways of approaching other people, so a powerful first step in any interaction is to notice which mode you're in. When you're in one thing is true mode, you're judgmental of and reactive to someone else's experience because it feels like an assault on your own truth. As a result, you will seek to prove your own point of view, which in turn makes the other person defensive because they need to uphold the realness of their experience. In One Thing is True mode, exchanges escalate quickly. Each person thinks they're arguing about the content of the conversation when in fact they're trying to defend that they are a real, worthy person with a real, truthful experience. And again, is this convincing? Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Apollo.
Chapter 16. You've got to start biting somewhere. During the years when the spacecraft was being designed and built, the man who managed ASPO was the fulcrum of the spacecraft side of the Apollo program, with an influence far beyond his place in the organization chart. This had been true in the fall of 1963 when Joe Shea went to Houston, and it remained true in the spring of 1967. On Sunday morning, April 2nd, Robert Gilruth and George Low flew to Washington to recruit Joe Shea's replacement. Their choice was Chuck Matthews, a founding father of manned spaceflight, one of the Space Task Group's original 45, the first director of flight operations for Mercury, the man who rescued Gemini when it encountered managerial troubles. With the successful completion of Gemini, Matthews had recently been promoted out of Houston into Miller's office at headquarters. Gilruth and Lowe checked into the Georgetown Inn and invited him over for a talk. They ran into a stone wall. Matthews had just moved to Washington and promised his family that this was it, no more moves for a while, no more weeks on end when he hardly saw the children. The ASPO job was tempting, but he just couldn't accept. Anyway, Matthews and George Miller had been talking it over themselves and had decided on another person for the job. The person they had decided upon was George Low. Low was nonplussed. Thinking back on it later, Matthews, who was one of Low's closest friends, reflected that he was putting Low into an unusual position. George Low always preferred that things proceed according to an orderly process, and that he, George Low, be in control of that orderly process. Usually he was. Chuck Matthews was supposed to take the job. That's the way Low had planned it. He had never, I guess, experienced a situation like this one, Matthews said, where someone put the finger on him and he didn't have control. Finally, Low said, "Chuck, I've got the worst headache I've ever had in my life." Matthews suggested they go for a walk. They strolled in the spring twilight along the quiet residential streets of Georgetown, talking intently. The new job would be a demotion, of course, from number 2 man at Houston to manager of a program office. But Joe Shea had taken a theoretical demotion when he went to ASPO. So had Low when he went from headquarters to the deputy director's job in Houston. Apollo managers bounced around the hierarchy without paying much attention to that sort of thing. Low in particular had never been a man who worried about the color of the carpet on the floor, in Matthews's words. And he knew that ASPO was the critical job right then, no matter what the organization charts said. Still, Low had carefully decided what ought to happen. Matthews would manage ASPO, and it took a long time for him to reconcile himself to a different plan. They walked for hours, Matthews remembered, getting back to the Georgetown Inn late at night. But finally, Low agreed to take the job. There followed the next morning a charade that has erroneously gone into some history books. Miller, Gilruth, and Matthews decided that it would be impolitic to present Webb with a fait accompli. So Matthews's refusal was presented to Webb along with a suggestion that they ought to talk Low into taking the job. Webb thought it was a terrific idea, and nothing would do but that they call Page Terminal at National Airport and have them hold Gilruth's and Low's plane. Webb, Siemens, Phillips, and Miller all piled into Webb's official car, went out to the airport, and persuaded George Low. In recounting his selection as head of ASPO to NASA historians, Low never wavered from the official version. 1.
By good luck as much as anything else, the Apollo program seemed to get the right men at the right time. In 1963, they needed an impatient, charismatic man who would seize the spacecraft and pull it through North American. Because much of Houston was preoccupied with Gemini during this period, they also needed a man who liked to do everything himself. They got Joe Shea. In 1967, they needed a knitter of people, in Glyn Lunny's graceful phrase, someone who could win the trust of the disparate elements in Houston and bring them together as a working whole. They got George Low. Except in ability, Low and Shea were mirror images. They were both born in 1926, but instead of Bronx working-class Irish, Low was Viennese-Austrian, the son of a well-to-do manufacturer, educated in private schools in Switzerland and England before his widowed mother brought Georg Wilhelm to the United States in 1938. Instead of a systems engineer working on nuclear missiles, Low was a Lewis man with the NACA from 1949 on, who wrote papers on esoteric problems in boundary layer theory and heat transfer. While Shea reveled in pressure and complexity in the clash of personalities, Low sought order and harmony. In personal manner, Low was unassuming to the point of diffidence. Back in the late 1950s, Cadwell Johnson reminisced when they were fabricating the first Mercury capsule in the Langley shops. They roped off the area immediately around the capsule so that visitors wouldn't get in the way of the engineers and technicians. One day, Johnson noticed that a fellow was right up next to the capsule, even running his hand over the metal shingles. Johnson went over and reprimanded him. "You know you're supposed to stay behind the ropes, don't you?" Johnson said belligerently. The man apologized and did as he was told. Johnson returned to his work. Another engineer came over and whispered to him, "You know who you were talking to?" Johnson didn't. "That's George Low." Johnson looked over again, and he was still there, peering intently at the spacecraft, a young man with a kindly face, thin, a little stooped. He was NASA's program manager for manned spaceflight, and he was standing quietly behind the ropes. He never lost that quietness. Later, in the days when he ran ASPO, subordinates would sometimes call the Low home late in the evening for advice on some new problem, and they would hear a soft voice answer the phone. "May I speak to your father?" they would ask George Low. And yet this same man took some of the boldest initiatives in the manned space program, succeeding in them because he was a leader, classically defined. Men followed him, as they followed Shea before him. Kraft in flight operations, Davis at the Cape, and von Braun at Marshall. But he was specifically suited for a particular kind of leadership, the leadership of engineers. He was, first of all, unwaveringly faithful to good engineering when he made decisions. To be friends with somebody is one thing, but when you're in the technical arena, it's technical. I don't give a damn whether I play golf with you or whatever. That's a different world. Low knew that. He added to that an infinite capacity for detail. George was the kind of guy that if you gave him a job emptying wastebaskets, he would stretch it into overtime. Not because he was loafing, but because he'd find more to emptying wastebaskets than you ever imagined could be there. He had a memory that was, by all accounts, phenomenal. He'll tell you, "You wrote me a memo a year and a half ago, and you told me that the oxygen flow rate was going to be 7.6 pounds per hour. And why is it 7.3 now?" What can you say to a guy like that? And he had a gift for organization and management that verged on genius. Low had an effect on his fellow engineers in Apollo that might have been hard for an outsider to appreciate. About a year after Low took over ASPO, one of Webb's deputies in Washington got a call from a friend who had just arrived in Houston. The man in Washington was sufficiently amused by the call to jot down the exchange verbatim immediately afterward. "I hope you don't think I'm nuts, but I want to tell you something," the caller said. "We had an Apollo briefing in the 9th floor conference room, and George Low spoke to us. God, it was the most exciting, lucid, thrilling, dynamic thing I've ever heard. Honest to God, it was just fantastic. He didn't even have a note. He held us all spellbound. So help me, if he had said, 'Let's go,' I'd have followed him right off a cliff." An observer who wasn't an engineer would have seen just a courteous man speaking quietly. 2. Taking up the ASPO job in early April, Lowe began dictating a daily memorandum to Gilruth, usually 2 or 3 typewritten pages, summarizing the day's activities. Following the fire, Gilruth made it known to others that Shea had not kept him informed about what was going on. The Apollo notes, as Lowe called them, were part of Lowe's way of avoiding that problem. In the process, he also provided historians with a unique day-by-day narrative. The Apollo notes are now part of the George M. Lowe papers at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. A few weeks later, returning from a trip to the North American plant in Downey, he wrote, "My general impression after this week's visit is that Dale Myers, Charlie Feltz, and George Jeffs are trying extremely hard to do the right things. The next level below them, however, disturbs me." Frank Borman, writing of that period in his autobiography, put it more bluntly. North American was positively schizophrenic, populated by conscientious men who knew what they were doing, and at least an equal number who didn't know their butts from third base. After 4 years of prodding and pushing from ASPO and headquarters, even after the embarrassment of the Phillips report, North American remained a problem. Borman was in a position to know. Gilruth had appointed him as head of a Tiger Team, an Air Force term for a small group of troubleshooters, to go out to Downey and be in charge of redefining the Block II spacecraft with North American. Borman took Aaron Cohen as his design engineer and Simpkinson as his quality and reliability expert. For the next 4 months, they spent every day in the North American offices with virtual carte blanche from Gilruth and Lowe to carry out the redefinition strategy that ASPO had decided upon. Houston also kept trying, as it had for years, to get some changes in the way that Downey operated. After a few days there, Borman noticed that many of the technicians were going across the street and having a few beers at lunch. Outrageous when you're working on a spacecraft, Borman told North American. And everyone, management and unions and the technicians themselves, agreed. The practice stopped. Jack Kinsler, the craftsman from Langley who had been heading the shops for the manned space program since the earliest days of the Space Task Group, was dispatched to Downey to look around the shops. Kinsler identified 30 or 40 things that offended him: sloppy handling of materials, confused demarcation of workspaces on the shop floor, lots of wasted time, and wrote them up. Gilruth sent a copy to the president of North American. The offensive practices got fixed. But other problems of scheduling and efficiency that had persisted for years at first seemed as impervious to solution as they ever had. In another Apollo note to Gilruth with "no other copies to anyone except RRG" scrawled in big letters across the top, Lowe listed the kinds of things he was finding when he went to North American. Item: up to 5 people could work productively in a command module at any one time, but out at the Downey plant, Lowe and his managers rarely saw more than 2 or 3, often only 1. Item: the industry average for a wire termination was 6 minutes. At North American, they were taking up to an hour and a half. Item: Lowe's people had seen it take as long as 4 hours to install 1 washer. Item: the wire harness for Spacecraft 101 was not even started until 5 weeks after it was supposed to be completed. Someone at North American had to start doing something about this.
And that was Chapter 16 and Chapter 16 Part 1 and Part 2 from Apollo by Charles Murray and Catherine Bly Cox. Next week, Chapter 16 Part 3. Back in a minute. Thank you, and this is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that materialism is a concept.